people go to their primary care physician. They'll come up with an autoimmune condition, or they'll have chronic kidney disease, everything from, like terminal cancers, people, given, weeks to live, been diagnosed with some things that, doctors at the time said that were unhealable. And I said, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong, which is massive, 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 massive. But I did. I proved the doctors wrong, and I healed myself from some things that doctors now say, just treatable with medication. And I completely healed it. And just do it. Make yourself uncomfortable.
I'm Darian.
I'm Elena, and this is our podcast, Step into Success,
where we give you an inside look at how people are currently creating success in their respective fields.
Our mission is to bring you into the trenches for an inside view and hopefully give some inspiration and knowledge as you work towards success in your own way.
Today, our guest is one of my dear friends, Josh Farris. His business is Farris Coaching. So Josh is really an expert in holistic healing, social media. I'm going to really let him introduce himself and get into it. But Josh, we just want to, thank you a lot for being on, Step into Success, and looking forward to the conversation, man.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. I'm honored to be here. And I think it's going to be a wonderful show. We're going to rock this thing and hopefully get some good information out there.
Yeah, for sure. So Josh, just start off by just telling us, who you are, what you do, and, we'll just get started right there.
Perfect. Well, my name is Josh Farris. I've got a consulting company called Farris Coaching right now. I've built my, I guess you would say I built my company from social media, from a social media following, and basically kind of what we do. There's a lot of, it's kind of we do kind of a lot of things right now, wear a lot of hats, but the main thing that we do is we help people, take the power into their own hands and start to, use holistic natural ways to actually improve and sometimes even heal the body in, holistic natural ways. And we just kind of bring that power back to people. It's kind of old, some things that, have been forgotten, but that's kind of generally in a nutshell with some herbalist and some nutrition and some stuff all in there. We just kind of throw it in a pot and, do some consulting. And that's kind of in a nutshell what we do.
Man, that's awesome. It's really interesting. Like, love your videos. Everybody, we're going to drop links in so people can go check it out. But can you just tell us, tell the audience, how did you get started down this journey? Like, where did the inspiration come from?
That is a very interesting question. There is a little bit of backstory actually behind that question. And really where I got started was, back as a child, like I've always had a passion for health. And I did not really realize it until, into my, middle to, late 20s. I didn't realize, the passion that I had. And looking back on my childhood as like a 12, 13, 14-year-old, young male in elementary school and in middle school and high school, I was always very interested in health. And, about 10 years ago, I think it's going on about 10 years now, I became really ill. I became really ill. I'd actually been diagnosed with some things that, doctors at the time said that were unhealable. And just being the hard head and the rebel that I always have been, I said, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I didn't do that, initially because I believed it, because I did not believe in the, natural healing. I didn't believe in any of that kind of thing. Right. But, just as a hard head, I was like, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong. So that's what I did. I set out to prove the doctors wrong. And it took a while. And it took me a couple of years to do it, but I did. I proved the doctors wrong, and I healed myself from some things that doctors now say, and even then, that were, just treatable with medication. And I completely healed it, and, did that. And that's really where I got started. And then I realized on the way that other people need this. Like, I realized, that this is a thing that, if I can do, other people can do as well. And, here in the West and in the United States, we're, sicker now and fatter and, just in worse condition than, any time in history. So, I just felt really inspired because it's always been something that I have had a passion for. So I figured, hey, I healed myself, why can't I not, kind of pass that on? So that's kind of where the inspiration, came from was, kind of going on my own healing journey where a lot of healers and a lot of practitioners go, is down that road. I've noticed, a lot of people go on that same journey. So that's kind of where we started.
That's really cool to hear. So being that that's kind of where you started, it was a very personal journey for you. What do you see yourself like accomplishing as your business continues to grow? What do you want other people, the clients that you serve, what do you hope to accomplish with them?
That is a really good question. What I would really like to see is I want to see more people have that, get their power structure back. I would like to see more people be able to get their power back and be able to take care of themselves because, going forward, with my business, I want to see people be empowered. That's what I really like. I like to see people that have their own personal power to be able to take their healing into their own hands and to be able to, in general, think for themselves and, be able to be independent and not necessarily dependent upon a system or, whatever. This is not a dig against the system or, the government or, doctors or anything like that. But I do think that there's a place for people to be able to do that. And that's what I want to do. That's really my mission, kind of my journey. And, kind of the thing that we're on right now is to, kind of teach people how to, take their healing and take their power back into their own hands.
Yeah, that's great.
That's amazing.
And so it's kind of interesting because you have a really big presence on TikTok and social media. And so you're literally like in people's hands, teaching them how to take their power back into their own hands. So can you talk a little bit more about like how you use social media to get started and to get your information out there and to really start helping people?
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic in itself, the social media and kind of how that this whole thing really got started. And I guess that really started about almost a little over a year ago now that I've been doing the social media thing. And it's a really interesting thing on social media. It's a double-edged sword because if you use it, you can get lost in the social media if you're not careful, but at the same time it's a double-edged sword because things like TikTok have come along and they have given the power for somebody like me that did not necessarily have that big of a reach, when I first started out. They gave me a bigger area to, get my message out. And that's what I really like about social media. But you got to be, I've noticed you've got to be really careful with social media at the same time, just because it is a double-edged sword. So you can get lost in it. But at the same time, we're living in an age now that we have this incredible power, and social media is so incredibly powerful, and I love it. And at the same time, you just got to respect it just because, you can get carried away with it. But I love my social media. I really wouldn't be where I am today without it. So it's a very interesting power that we have, and I really do enjoy it. It's, something that I really enjoy and something that I have, it took me a while to build up, but it's definitely a good thing and something that I really enjoy doing now.
Can you speak a little bit more to that journey for you of how you started building up? Was it just like consistent posting, getting content out there? Was there any specific strategy you used or just kind of like, hey, just give it a go and see what happens? And it just blew up on its own. Like, tell us more about that.
Sure. So I'll be honest with you. So like I'm a researcher guy, and that's kind of why the whole thing that, this whole thing came to be is because I started doing my own research. But when I started this, I always wanted to, speak in front of people. And, I saw really early on that, social media was a really easy way to be able to speak in front of a lot of people. So I started researching and started out really slow. And I'll be honest with you, I tried everything in the book, every strategy in the book, every strategy from, A to Z, just to see what would work. And what I found that worked for me and my message and what I was, what I've been promoting is is almost be very polarizing into almost a sense that you almost just kind of like everybody else. Like what worked for me is kind of like almost making things that I did not necessarily agree with, kind of the bad guy. Not necessarily that I really felt it that way, but I tried to spin it in a way that it was very polarizing. And this is the only way, and this is this is how you do this, and this is however you want to spin that message. But it was I tried to be very polarizing, and I noticed that seemed to be the thing that helped me grow the fastest. When I first started, my thing was just growth, and I would talk about. When I first started my social media thing, I would talk about anything, if anything that would get views and anything that would, things that weren't even in my wheelhouse, I would talk about those things. And that's really, speaking on those things, really kind of got the ball rolling. And as I saw kind of what worked for me, I just really put my foot on the gas and just really tried to be as polarizing as possible. And that worked really well, to get me to where, to get me to where I am now. Now, I don't quite do that as much now just because, it's just, it's kind of it's also a double-edged sword kind of thing, a fine line to walk, but I don't do that so much now that I have my following and I have my people. I still get growth, but I'm not so polarizing because at the same time, you when you're very polarizing, it's almost kind of like you build your audience, but you're also at the same time, it's almost like you're kind of a bad guy to the other crowd. It's kind of like, I can't stand that guy. I can't stand what he says. His stuff is, too much for me. And to be honest with you, I backed off of that because I don't want to necessarily be polarizing to that other crowd. I think that everybody has a message and everybody has something that somebody can learn from. And I want everybody to be able to, learn from what I'm trying to say. So I'm not quite as polarizing as, I was when I first started or whatever. So
did you experience some of that pushback in the beginning where you were being polarizing? Like, were you seeing comments, flooding in or, just kind of like any lashing back from the other side of people, on the other side of the aisle?
I'll be honest, the social media thing, it's a thing that you better, if you're going to do it and you're going to be out there, you better have tough skin because there is always this other side of it that there's somebody on there that's going to be the big bad guy that's going to tell you that you were wrong. And that is a thing at first that I kind of struggled with because I kind of took it personally, the backlash, that because I was very polarizing on what I said in the backlash. So I took it personal, but over time I kind of developed the tough skin of the people because it has, to be honest with you, I've been doing it for a little over a year now, and I get probably just as much hate and as much just people talking trash now as I did then. So it's something that doesn't stop, but it definitely is there because if you're out there making your opinion known, there's always going to be that other side telling you that either that you're wrong or that, something, there's always the hecklers out there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep.
Tough skin. All right.
Yeah, that's
good tip. Anybody looking to grow social media?
that's interesting. I think that's a really cool perspective. Like, being polarizing to grow the audience and then to get your message out there. I mean, I appreciate the authenticity of, telling us about that. I bet there's a lot of people in the audience that are going to be listening to this and hearing this that are either trying to grow their own social media following or they have a brand they want to build and they want to use social media to do that. How did you just overcome those fears of putting yourself out there? I mean, did you even have a fear of that? I know you said when you got started, you got a lot of backlash, but even before you got started, like, how did you jump into the fire, so to speak?
Now, that is a really good question. That is a question that even still to this day, after hundreds of videos, after interviews, after talking to, very high level clients, people that, make a lot of money, people that, have a lot of, clout in certain areas. I still, to this day, get a little bit nervous when it comes down to, putting myself out there. And I don't know that that is a thing that you ever get over, to be honest with you. I really don't. But I do think it's kind of like anything else. The more you practice it, the better that you get at it, and the easier it is to, make those videos, and especially up front when you don't have a lot of experience and you want people to like you. That's the thing. When you first start out in social media, you want everybody to like you. You want the vegans to like you. You want the meat eaters to like you. You want the spiritual people, the Christians. You want everybody to like you. And that's just simply something that is not going to happen. And especially being polarizing at first, that, to be honest with you, that was one of the hardest things that I experienced in my growth was, I guess you would say to be able to put myself out there and to be polarizing on something where I knew that I was about to piss some people off for sure, what I was going to say. So, that was a very hard thing to overcome, but it's almost kind of like one of those things. Once you do it a couple of times, it gets easier, and it does get easier, and it gets easier. It never goes away, because I still have those things, today when I put a video out, but it does get better with a little bit of time. It's just kind of a repetition type thing that kind of made it easier for me personally. But I know everybody's a little bit different when it comes down to that kind of stuff too. Some people are a little bit, better at public speaking and like to be in front of people. I'm kind of not. I know it kind of sounds strange, having a social media presence. I'm kind of like a shy guy a little bit, so when it comes down to that stuff. So, it was definitely difficult at first, but I think if I can do it, my advice to anybody that would be starting a social media channel or starting their own brand would be just do it. Make yourself uncomfortable. It's kind of like sales, once you get a few under your belt, it just gets easier to kind of, go and talk to those people. So just do it a couple of times, and it'll, it'll get there for you for sure.
Yeah, that's a really, good point. I think I do see the social media that you do does come across as, almost like you said, like sales, right? You got to develop that thick skin. You got to deal with the people rejecting you and being negative at first to eventually get through to the ultimate goal. Let me ask you this real quick. Just, if where you are right now, if your current self could go back a year and a half and talk to your, past self, what advice, knowing what you know now and knowing where you're at now, is there anything that you would change, anything that you could have done differently to have, made, your social media growth, quicker or anything? What is something that you've learned that you wish you could, have known before you got into it?
Man, that is also a really good question. That is something that I think about pretty regular. And I feel like, sometimes I feel like not that I could write a book, because by no means do I feel like I have this thing figured out, but I do have some experience, when it comes down to these things. And I feel like if I could say something to my, self like a year and a half ago, what advice would I give myself to be able to do this thing maybe a little bit faster, maybe a little bit better? And the thing that I would say would be authentic. That's the thing, is do not sell out talking about something, one, that you may not have experience with, something that you don't find interest in, and, don't do things that just make you go quote unquote viral. Talk about things that, one, interest you the most, and just stick with it and stay with that until, you literally, that to me seems like the thing that builds the best and the most growth. Okay. is being authentic and talking about what makes you tick, because this is kind of a strange thing, but when you get into quantum physics and when you get into the physics of everything and how kind of opposites attract and light attracts to light, when you do those things and when you are yourself, you're going to attract the people that are most like you, and the people that you're going to resonate with, and the people that you're going to make the most impact on because they are like you. And that's one thing that I wish I would have done differently, and I had known from the get-go. That's the one piece of advice I think I would have given myself, would be just be authentic and talk about things that you like. Don't talk about things that, are going viral and all these hooks and Taylor Swift songs and all the things, that how social media goes and how, starting all that stuff. Don't do that stuff. Talk about things that you like. and just stick with it, and just, your audience, you will eventually build your audience that way, and it'll come faster actually if you do that.
Well, how about let's start with I've seen like a lot of your content on TikTok. You cover just a wide range of topics, which is really cool. So I want to get into some of those, but maybe let's just talk about, to start, what are you kind of seeing in your industry right now? Like, are there things that people currently are really struggling with in aggregate, or is it just, is there anything that's trending, I guess, in the holistic health field and with your clients?
That's a really good question. So right now, I kind of give you a little background on my journey so you guys can kind of, and the listeners can kind of understand a little bit kind of, where we are. I'm about a year into this journey as a business. I come from a background of, of kind of like a blue collar style background, hard work, go to work, work a 40-hour work week, kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I believe that's extremely important, and it should be like that. But, I come from a background, this something completely different, the internet thing and working for yourself is just kind of a little bit, different for me. So I'm about a year into this process, and it's definitely a learning curve. There's a lot to learn, especially because as a, I guess as you would say, like a content creator or a, influencer, whatever you would, consider my business, the field is different for everybody. Some people do brand deals, where they make their money on brands. Some people, do consultations like me. And that's kind of where I find myself and my clients right now, is I'm doing a lot of consultations with helping people heal, things that they were told that they could. A lot of times what happens is people go to, like, let's say they'll go to their primary care physician or whatever, and they'll come up with an autoimmune condition, or they'll have chronic kidney disease or whatever, condition it is. And they go to the doctor, and then the doctor puts them on medications, and they all, go on this gamut of, trying this and trying that. And, sometimes they get better, sometimes they get worse. And eventually they get tired of kind of dealing with that thing kind of day in and day out. And that's where I kind of come in. That's where, people typically come to me. That's where I put my information on social media is, try to give people the ability that they do have the power to heal. And that's where I've kind of found myself with, my business in the last year is, helping people, doing consultations and doing coaching programs and things like that to help people kind of heal, holistically and naturally, whether that be from a diet program, whether that be from, I've written a couple of programs that have helped people, with like kidney disease and like, gut trouble and, things like that. And, that's, kind of where things have evolved and with my business this year. And I've kind of noticed, with the business that you always start, you kind of start with one direction, and then you kind of get in it, you get your feet wet. You're like, hey, okay, all right, I kind of started here, but you know what? I'm kind of going over here because I see there's a need over here. I'm kind of liking this a little bit better. I see there's a little bit of a niche here. People are kind of, we're kind of feeling each other. Things are going really smooth this way. And you kind of shift a little bit. And that's kind of obviously what has happened with my business. Is I started out with, health consultations and helping people with that. And then I kind of moved into the herbal side, still helping people with consultations and stuff like that, but then kind of jumped into the herbal side. And then now I'm kind of, something that I have noticed within the last year is, you asked about a trend. And it's very interesting you asked that question. And what I have noticed is, with everybody that I have talked to, I've done a lot of consultations over the last year. This last summer, I did, 8 to 10 consultations every single day, Monday through Friday. Wow. And you can see how quickly, that adds up, over time, that number adds up. So I've got a pretty good number out of, 500 or, less people that I talked to. I've got a kind of, what I saw was a pretty good, view of like kind of what's trending with people in the, in this world. And one thing that I noticed is people tend to have trouble with their gut health. Gut health tends to be a problem that most people struggle with, even if they don't know that they actually, have those issues. They struggle with gut health. And I've dealt with people with, everything from, like terminal cancers, people, giving, weeks to live, people that had autoimmune conditions, people that dealt with kidney disease, you name it. I have talked to somebody with it. And with all that, every one of them, and this is what I have kind of, what I have gathered, once you start doing the testing and you start looking at labs and you start, looking, talking to the doctors with these people, there is a trend here that literally every single disease, and this is 10 out of 10 people that have a named disease. It don't matter what it is. You can name it and this applies to it. People that disease is tied to bad gut health every single time. Some kind of disturbance, and it's different for everybody, but that is a trend that I have noticed over the last years after talking to hundreds of clients of mine, is that people that have diseases, it always stems from their gut health. It's poor gut health, typically goes into that. So you asked about, kind of some trends and some things that I have seen with my clients over the last year. That's one of the things that I have really noticed that has been something that is kind of hitting home to me, because honestly, it's weird that I noticed that, because that's honestly where I started myself on this journey 10 years ago, was bad gut health. And that's where I started. So it's very interesting. It's kind of come full circle now that I'm kind of wanting to go back in that direction, kind of where I, cut my teeth in this, kind of 10 years ago or whatever. So, yeah.
That's interesting. And it must be, if you say it 10 out of 10 and then name the disease and it applies, that must be the biggest trend in the, health world right now, or especially when it comes to like the holistic healing and what you and people that do the type of work you do are seeing out there, right? I mean, that's got to be the top trend.
Yep, absolutely. It's definitely a trend, and it's definitely something that I have noticed. And I didn't intentionally set out to do that. As I look back on this, as I look back on the, how we have, as I look back on the last year, kind of like a year in review, and I look back and, because I'm always wanting to evolve my business, like, how can I help people better? What is the one thing that I can do to make a bigger impact on everybody? Because here's the thing, consultations in my business, you can only do so many consultations in a daily, you can only fit so many in before, you run out of energy or daylight or, time and energy or whatever. So I was thinking, what can I do to help the most people? And I thought, hey, people are having the biggest issue with their gut health. So it kind of made me kind of twist around and, think about how can I help impact people that way. So yeah, that's kind of where, kind of the trend is going on my side anyway, what I'm seeing and kind of the direction I want to head for the future, actually.
Hey, so with gut health, problems with gut health being the biggest trend and being such a problem, in your opinion, is that a direct correlation with modern foods and modern diets, especially here in the United States?
That is a very good question. Very good question. And that is, there's a couple of factors that play into that. And that is probably, I would say there's a 1-2 punch right now. And that is probably either going to be one or number two, depending on what, you kind of look at. But then there's really 3 to 4 main things, and the food industry is going to be, that issue. And that in like what you say, the modern food is going to be the thing that is going to cause, the biggest, issue that I see with gut health. There are some other things like stress. Stress is big. I mean, you guys know that, everybody is stressed, nowadays, with the economy, the weird stuff, everything going on, whether it be geopolitical news or whatever it is, we're stressed, whether it be, a pandemic going around or, whatever it is, there's stress of some sort, whether it be your job or kids or family or what have you, stress is one of the major players in gut health as well. You mentioned it, food. The next thing that, that we see with that is which is massive, is the way that we are, the things that we're doing to our food now, not only, the things that we're eating, but it's the things that we are doing, the agricultural practices that are absolutely destroying our food. And, I want this, I want this podcast, to as a guest here, I want to spark, I want to plant some seeds in people's mind that listen to this, and I want to plant a seed in everybody's mind here. Now, anybody that listens to this in the future, I want you to understand that there is a chemical, and it's called glyphosate. And this chemical called glyphosate it's the active ingredient in everybody's heard of this. Everybody's heard of this. The weed killer Roundup. Everybody knows what that is. You spray it on the weeds on the parking lot, whatever, kills the weeds, whatever. All right, so no big deal. If you do that. But here's the problem: this chemical is absolutely destroying gut health, because here's what it does: is that chemical has been used by these agricultural giants at this point to spray on our food to keep the fields clean and to, destroy weeds and things like that.
Right.
These companies have engineered certain seeds to withstand this chemical. So you can spray it on it pretty good, before, it will, actually kill the plant.
Right.
So with that being said, what happens is this right here: that chemical is being sprayed on everything that we eat now. And when we eat these things, that chemical is being sprayed on that so many times, the residue hangs around. It has a half-life of a really long time. So everything that we're eating, especially wheat products, I know you guys know people that are, have to be gluten-free now. I'm sure you guys both can either, attest to that or know somebody who's gluten-free, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, all right. So with that being said, this chemical glyphosate is, one of the big things. I don't mean to, kind of steal that away, but I kind of wanted to plant this seed, in case we didn't get back around to that, so that people can kind of go look into this, kind of arm themselves with the knowledge that, hey, maybe, stay away from the things that are sprayed with this poisonous chemical, because it destroys your gut health. It destroys your gut microbiome. It creates leaky gut. It creates, autoimmune condition issues. It creates so many different things that you don't even associate with it. It's just kind of a trickle down effect. And eventually it causes issues in the body if you deal with it long enough. So I didn't mean to kind of steal the question there, but I was just kind of, to plant that seed there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but that's one of the most interesting things I've heard since doing this show. Right. And honestly, I'm glad you said that, because hopefully that helps somebody in the audience. Right. I mean, it helps me. I just learned something totally new.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is interesting. So, I mean, when you got these chemicals going into the food, and then you have fast food rampant, and the cost of groceries going up. And I know we're kind of getting down a whole different trail here, but I'm just, curious, what are some things people can do? What are some things you're just, average, college student that's busy, or your average guy that's working a 9 to 5 and, making a moderate amount of money and can't go out and buy the best organic everything all the time? What can people like that do to help mitigate their risk a little bit?
That is a fantastic question. I like to pride myself into being somebody that gives people options, because like you say, not everybody can necessarily always afford to eat, organic and non-GMO all the time, because unfortunately those things are more expensive. And, having to stretch your dollar further nowadays, it can be a little bit more difficult. So if I were going to say, hey, average Joe, this got, a few dollars to spend, you're in college, you want to eat healthier, what can you do to kind of mitigate your things, and try to, take care of your gut as much as possible, and kind of, avoid some of these pesticides and herbicides and, fungicides that are sprayed on our food. What I would suggest would be, and this is easy. This is the cool thing, is this: I love free. I love giving information for free that it doesn't cost you anything. I love that stuff. I love free stuff, man, because I mean, it's just, we have options. And the biggest thing that I would suggest for everybody that wanted to, do something for their gut health is, if you're going to eat grains, and I'm not a huge grain guy. I'm not a huge grain fan, just because there's some other things besides, this a whole different rabbit trail of, the phytic and lectins and the acids and stuff in the grains. But if you're going to eat grains like wheat and rye and barley and those type things, if you're going to eat those, and corn, what I would suggest that you do is, if you're going to eat that type stuff, which those are the things, for the college people, that's the thing that they eat the most of, because it's cheap, exactly.
I mean, the schools put that at the bottom of the food pyramid. I mean, they tell you eat sense to them.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's exactly right. You're kind of onto like why, kind of on a rabbit trail here, on why there so many people have issues now is because of the food pyramid. It's just it's almost backwards nowadays. But those things, grains are cheap, so if I were going to suggest what somebody would do is I would suggest to start. It's not necessarily what you put in. You don't have to buy a bunch of organic supplements and food and stuff like that. Just take some stuff out. Things like wheat. If you're going to, if you're going to eat that stuff, this is one of those areas that I would either recommend that you either buy organic, non-GMO, products when it comes to grains, or don't eat them at all, because it's actually worse for you and will be worse for you in the long run if you eat these things and buy the cheap version. So I would rather you just kind of, buy more, put that money towards, some organic meat or some, meat products, or some, something that is, ideally, less processed as much as possible or whatever. But, that would be the thing that I would say would be the easiest thing to start with is, watch what you're putting in and just don't necessarily add to the fire. That doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything, extra to, kind of go grain free, necessarily. So it's kind of something that anybody can, practice and should practice, in my opinion.
All right. So we kind of talked about, people can start eliminating stuff from their diets and really just being conscious about the purchasing choices they're making at the grocery store. A couple of the other things I noticed on when I was, just checking out your content on TikTok, something you mentioned was grounding. That's kind of another one of those things that is accessible to everybody. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that helps our health overall?
100%. And that's kind of what, when I said it just a little bit ago, like the free things, that was one of the things that I actually had in mind that everybody typically has access to some sort of ground. And for the people that are not really sure what grounding is simply you connecting back to the Earth's surface. And basically what that does is, that requires you to either put your bare hands, bare skin of some sort, typically feet, that's what most people do, put their feet on the, the surface of the earth, whether that be grass, mud, dirt, sand, gravel, things like that, wood, anything, things that aren't conductive, wouldn't work, like wood or plastic, but, typically anything else, that is connected to the earth, it's connecting your body back to the earth. And grounding is actually probably one of the most important things that you can actually do for your health, because in the day-to-day life that we live in, we talk about gut health. We talk about, the different stresses and things that we mentioned earlier. All of those things create inflammation in the cells of our body. We got like 100, depending on who you listen to, but somewhere about 100 to 150 trillion cells in the body. That's a lot of cells. And each one of those cells can take on some inflammation. And, our diet, the Wi-Fi, the 5G towers, the cell phone radiation, the bad foods, just everything that we are experiencing now that creates stress on our cells creates inflammation. And when we get our body and connect it back to the earth, our body basically, without going into kind of nutty science on it, is basically what happens is our body becomes electrically balanced again, because we get positively charged when we, because what happens is, our rubber soled shoes disconnect us from the earth. Back 100 years ago, we would be connected to the earth with, moccasins or leather or wood or something that was conductive. So we would be typically connected to the earth. Well, nowadays we've got, rubber soled shoes, and those are non-conductive. So we are insulated all day long. And then we get all this food and radiation and, different, things that creates inflammation in the body. So therefore our body is too positively charged. What happens is your cells, create a lot of stuff and create inflammation. And what you can do to mitigate that, and it's free. Everybody can do it. The coolest thing is anybody can do that as long as you can find some free ground. You get some ground and put your feet on the ground. It's called grounding, and it's basically it equalizes that electric charge. So you go from too positively charged to back to equal. So that helps that inflammation go down. And that's one of the best things, that's actually one of my biggest topics that I talked about last year, where I got most of my growth on social media was actual grounding. And it's one of the best things that you can actually do for your body, and it's free. And there's multiple ways to ground. You can do it for free outside in your yard. You can get what I like to do, which is like a grounding mat. That way you can sleep on it in your body. And basically a grounding mat connects you to the earth while you're in bed. It basically goes through not the electricity, but the ground of your house or whatever. And that gives you the biggest bang for your buck, in my opinion. One of the best things that you can do for inflammation in the body. So I love grounding. It's one of the best things that you can do, and it doesn't cost anything. Anybody can do it. It doesn't matter where you're at an income level, how much money you've got to spend. Everybody can ground. I recommend everybody do it every single day, 30 minutes minimum, more, possible. If you can get a grounding mat or a grounding product, even better. But everybody should be grounding to kind of mitigate some of these, some of these issues that we're having today with inflammation and things like that in our bodies.
I got a quick question for you. So for people out there that have never done grounding or anything like that, what are the benefits that you would like? What would you notice in your day-to-day life if you did grounding? And like, how long would it take to notice that? Is it something I could do just like once and I would feel different? Or like, what would I notice differently if I was doing grounding?
That may be one of my most asked questions is that right there? That's a phenomenal question. And as far as grounding, everybody's a little different because everybody's body has, different, levels of inflammation. We have different levels of everything. So everybody's a little different. But if you look scientifically at it and you look at it, from a scientific perspective, and you look at it from, real world evidence, what people are, doing in real life, typically most people within a couple of days will notice a difference. But the thing about grounding is, yes, you can go outside and put your feet on the ground right now and you will notice a difference instantly on how you feel. But the long-term effects and the anti-inflammatory effects that you're going to get from grounding typically does require a little bit longer for you to be a little more consistent. So, a couple of days, in a row, is going to be something like that. And to answer your question, what are some benefits? You're going to notice less inflammation in your body, depending on what kind of, issues you have, where your inflammation is, you're going to notice less inflammation. You're going to notice less pain. You're going to, there's about 20 peer-reviewed scientific papers and articles on the benefits of grounding. It does everything from lowering blood pressure to helping, anxiety and depression, and helping with your gut health, and to helping, mobility. And there's so many different things, actual clinical peer-reviewed, evidence on this stuff. And there's just, everybody's different, but most people typically feel better really quickly, and they notice a mental clarity kind of thing. It's kind of like this fog gets lifted off of your eyes if you do it regular enough, because that brain inflammation is kind of goes down a little bit. So everybody, that's the thing that I hear from most of my clients is typically they kind of have that brain fog aha moment kind of thing is what I would say.
Wow, that's exciting that you can have that many benefits just from something as simple as like putting your feet on the ground. And now for people like us, I mean, we live in an apartment complex that's surrounded by concrete. There's a couple patches of grass though within that parking lot. Is that sufficient? Yep. Or do you kind of need to like get out into the woods or go to the beach or something that's a little bit more expansive for this to have the effects?
So the cool thing is you don't have to, those couple little patches that you can get your feet on, those are phenomenal. That's really all it takes. If you can put your feet on that for whatever time you can do, you'll see benefits from it. That's perfectly fine. And one does not have to necessarily get out in nature. Now, I do recommend the more you can get out in nature, the better. But you don't have to do that to, get the actual, all the benefits of actual grounding. One thing that, if you do, that's another question I get a lot is, I live in a high rise, apartment, I live in town, I live in a concrete jungle, help, what can I do? Well, here's the thing with any modern house, modern apartment building, modern building that's been built, since the 1970s has to, by law and by, city code and state code and all of that, has to be grounded to the earth. So they typically, through a grounding rod. So what they do is, if your building is, under code, like hopefully it is, like it should be, hopefully, that it is, if your building is under, the right code and is grounded properly, you can get what we call a grounding mat. And a grounding mat is basically where you plug into the ground. They're in your outlet here in America. There's the two, flat plugs, and the one in the middle there and the bottom, that's your ground. And basically you can get a grounding mat, and what you will do is you will plug a wire, specifically for that hole into that place. And what that does is, at that point, as when you connect to that, you are connected to the earth now through your wires of your house. And it works scientifically the exact same way. Wow. Even though you're not directly standing on the earth, if you've got one of those mats and you're plugged into the earth, the way electricity works, or you're still getting the same benefits as if your feet were on the, the earth. So that's the cool thing about it. So that's what I would recommend for people that are in a concrete jungle, or, kind of in your shoes there is, if you can't get out in nature, every day, get you a grounding mat and sleep on it every night. That way you get the same benefits, but you're not actually having to spend, hours outside. So that's what I would suggest for in that particular situation.
Oh, that's great. That's great news, because that's something I've noticed just since moving to the city. It's a little bit harder to get out, or you have to drive a little bit further to get out into nature. And so that's great to know that there's options for people in that situation.
Yep.
So
there are options for people like that. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the other things, I'm curious of your opinion on, we kind of talked about gut health and eliminating certain things from the diet, but what about fasting entirely, whether it's short-term, long-term? Like, what are your views on fasting as a topic?
You must have searched my social media and found my most popular topics, or you and I are like really close on the same mind here. I'm not really sure what it is. It may be both, but that's one of my other big topics, is fasting. And with fasting, here's the thing with fasting. There is a lot of nuance and there's a lot of context with fasting. Okay. Used to, back in the day, 30 to 100 years ago, if somebody, got sick and they wanted to heal themselves holistically, they could typically, do water fasting or dry fasting or some sort of fasting. And typically they could either reduce, the illness, at least until manageable, conditions, or even completely heal it just through fasting. Fasting's been used for like thousands of years, even since like biblical times and before, for, healings. So with that being said, nowadays, the toxicity load is a little different than it was 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and 100 years ago. So the problem with fasting is people think that you can just go start fasting and start healing everything. And you can. I don't want to say necessarily everybody can heal, but you can improve your condition enough to where you feel better. Right. And just by fasting. So with that being said, though, our toxic load is a little different than it was 100 years ago. We've got, I can't remember what the statistic is, how many thousands of toxins coursing through our body, just in one day than we did, from one whole year 100 years ago or whatever. So it's massive. Like it's unreal. And here's the thing with fasting. Fasting is so powerful. It is so good. It does so many good things for the body. And again, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. In fact, it'll save you on your grocery bill the more you actually fast. So, it's a great thing. So, but you got to be careful with fasting. Here's the thing with fasting. I recommend everybody start with intermittent fasting, which means that you typically are going to intermittently fast for either 12 to 20 hours, with no food, just water or coffee or whatever it is, no calories, basically from 12 to 20 hours. And then you can go longer if you want to, at that point or whatever. But I recommend if you're going to do fasting, and I recommend that everybody should do that because it does increase longevity and there's so many good benefits. I love fasting. It's amazing what fasting will do. But nowadays, you do have to be a little bit more careful because when you fast, your body breaks down toxins and it does release more toxins back into the body. So you do got to be a little bit more careful now. But I do think it's something that everybody should be doing at least once or twice a week, especially intermittent fasting, every couple of days, skip a meal, don't eat breakfast, just go straight to lunch, just drink water through lunch, and you'll get cognitive benefits. Your body will reduce, the cancer rates. Your body will regenerate cells. Your body will actually produce, human growth hormone, especially for guys in the gym, that want to get bigger, actually skipping a couple meals will actually make you bigger than, eating, that breakfast or whatever. So there's so many benefits.
Is there, you mentioned like the toxins, that's something new to me. I did not know that. So when you're fasting, your body is it like almost processing the toxins that are in there because it's not having to process other things that you're putting in your body?
That exactly. So I know we're strained all the time. I could go on and on about this stuff, but basically in a nutshell, you got 150 trillion cells and your body is very smart. So what it does is when your body takes in a toxin from wherever, doesn't matter. Sometimes when it gets overloaded, it's got to get it out of the bloodstream. And what it does is it puts it in, you've got cells, a cell, and a cell has a cell wall around it. And in that cell wall, you can store things and you can store toxins. And that's where the body will put things temporarily until it can deal with it. But the problem is we're this onslaught that never ends nowadays, and we're steadily being hit by these toxins. So it goes into these cells and it remains in the cells, and these cells are just unhealthy, because they've got toxins around the outside, in the cell wall. So what happens is when you fast, what happens is your body then goes into what we call autophagy. And autophagy just means that it's kind of like, if you can think of the Pac-Man little guy that, runs around that, eats all the little things. That's kind of what autophagy is. You've got these cells, these macrophages of your immune system that goes around eating all the bad, cells that are not healthy and that are dying and that have a lot of toxins. Well, what happens is when it eats that cell, it kind of busts open, and these toxins are kind of released back into the, into the bloodstream or back out into the body or whatever. So if you've ever fasted and you've noticed, like, man, like they said, fasting makes me feel good. It's supposed to feel good. Like I feel like crap. Like I just, you don't have energy, or, you're just kind of brain fog or whatever. Typically what that is your body has started into autophagy, and you kind of release some toxins back into the body. So that's why you just got to be just a little bit careful nowadays, just because of the toxin onslaught that we have. So, if you go to fasting and you start feeling really bad, that's typically a good sign. That means you're kind of doing the thing that you set out to do. So it's a good sign if you can get through that, that portion of it.
That's good to know, because I have actually experienced that, where it's like I'll start off feeling really good, and then later on I'm like, I don't know if I can do this, and that's because those little heavy brain fog, kind of just lethargic. So, but now I know why that happens. So
now
thank you
for
just
that
know,
just if you can make it through that time, eventually you'll start feeling better if you can just make it through, and that's the hard part.
Yeah. So is there anything like during that time where you're just that you can do to help get through that? Is it just like drinking more water, or just kind of toughen it out?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's both of what you just said. It is just one of those things. You're just going to have to tough it out. It is going to be one of those things that is going to be there. And it's kind of like the muscle memory. It's like practicing. The more you do it, the less it gets. So that, if you can practice it, a couple times a week, within a month, you'll be head and shoulders above where you started. So, but a good way to help with that is if you're in the process of it, and you're fasting, just drink as much water as you can, but make sure that, your water is a good quality water, not tap water. Try to stay away, from that stuff. That stuff is a whole nother, topic, but, drink a good quality, good filtered water, and that helps flush those toxins out through the liver and the kidneys and all that good stuff. So yeah, just drink a lot of water.
Josh, we have got some incredible information. You keep it up, man. You're going to be moving on from Step Into Success podcast, and we're going to be seeing you on 60 Minutes or Good Morning America or something like that, obviously.
Thank you.
So, hey, we want to wrap up, but I actually do have just one last question. You can answer it, quickly. If you had to just give our audience 2 to 3 things in a nutshell that they could do right now to instantly start improving their health, what would those 2 to 3, 4 things be?
I would say very well kind of what we had talked about here. A couple of things. First thing that I would suggest doing is not necessarily putting in a whole lot of supplements and eating a whole lot of, necessarily healthy organic foods. Take things out of your diet that may be contributing to inflammation. Start with that, wheat, dairy, a whole bunch of unorganic meat, stuff like that. Just take some stuff out. Processed food. That's the biggest. That's number one. Take things out. You don't have to add a whole lot of things back in. It doesn't really cost anything to kind of, take some stuff off. The second thing that I would suggest do is learn how to mitigate stress. Stress is actually one of the biggest issues that I see with my clients. Now, everybody's stressed and nobody knows how to deal with it because we have come from a world where we don't know. Learn how to mitigate stress. It'll change your life, whether it be meditation, getting out in nature, whatever it is that you do, just learn how to mitigate stress. And the third thing that I would probably say would be is I would say get back in nature. Get back in nature, which encompasses a lot of things like putting your feet on the ground, getting actual real sun on your skin. Not a lot, we're not talking about getting burnt, and skin damage and stuff like that, but get some real sun on your skin, get it back in your eyes, on your face, on your skin to produce the hormones that you need. Put your feet on the ground, but just basically kind of think about our ancestors and kind of get back to nature. Those would be the three things that I think anybody could do kind of starting today that really doesn't cost very much, if anything at all, and that everybody almost has access to for the most part. Pretty simple.
Josh, tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
Okay. So you guys can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram. And I'm actually on YouTube. My presence on YouTube is not that much. It's actually something that I'm working on right now to grow my YouTube presence. But you guys can go at this point. You can just go type in my name on, that would be the easiest thing instead of typing in underscores and any of that stuff. Social media is very easy to do now, but just type in Josh Farris, and that's Farris. That's Josh Farris. It's actually technically like Josh Farris _coaching, but now with social media, you don't even have to do that. But if you just on Instagram or TikTok, just go type in my name, you'll pull up my account, and that would be the best way to find my information, find anything that I've got out right now.
Got it.
Very nice.
Well, Josh, we really appreciate you being on the show. Got a lot of great information. I'm super excited about some of this. I learned quite a few new things right there. So hopefully the audience did too. And we just want to thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate y'all.